Om Sai Ram. Dear brother and sister, uncle, auntie, and all Sai family in Sai brotherhood. It's really wonderful time that in this life we ever knew Bhagavan Sri Sathya Sai Baba teaching who strengthened the 5 human values, that is Sathya, Dharma, Santi, Prema, and Ahimsa, that can make transform to our life to be a better and to know our its religion. As we already know also that Sai devotee came from many countries, from different religion, different fight. They come from many professions, politician, leader, founder to farmer, artist to scientist. And today we will hear the experience of Mr. Issact Tigret, the founder of Hard Rock Cafe, is also well known as a devotee who has had many interesting experiences in his life. He ever told that Bhagavan Sri Sathya Sai Baba had God and saved his life for twice big accident that almost make him die. So we will hear directly from him his interesting story regarding to Sai Baba divinity. In this time also, we hope he will explain why in every Hard Rock Cafe he put a big sign, motto that mention love all, serve all. That we already know also that the slogan is belong to organization Sai. So we're very glad to hear the interesting experience from Mr. Issact Tigret. We will hear together.
All of you, it's a great pleasure to be here. I thank the Society, and most of all, I thank our beloved Lord for bringing me here today. I thought today I would tell you my story. I am from Jackson, Tennessee, a small town outside of Memphis, Tennessee, where I grew up. I had a beautiful childhood until the age of about 13. At that time, I witnessed the death of one of my brothers. My older brother shortly afterwards went insane and eventually took his life. My parents were divorced, not before my father, who sort of ran the town, had the largest industry in the town, destroyed the family name and the business out of guilt. For many, many years I suffered from these tragedies, not unlike tragedies that many people experienced in this room. But it wasn't until I had the opportunity to ask Sathya Sai Baba a question, which he allowed me to ask. I said, Swami, why was I born into a family with so much pain, with so much tragedy, insanity, death, destruction? He smiled and said to me, to soften your heart. Suddenly, what I had considered to be a horrible upbringing, I realized was perfect. Because it had made me sensitive to everything and everyone in my world. So many of you who may feel that you have been dealt a bad card in life should look at the positive aspects that have come from your personality. I was blessed at a very young age to go to England at the age of 15. I never graduated from high school, nor did I go to college. I started a business there, a business now world famous called the Hard Rock Cafe. I was 19 years old when I started that business. Shortly after starting this business, after a year or two, it was very successful. In fact, Sai Baba arranged for it to be successful. I was ashamed that I had not gone to college. I had not graduated from high school. So I wanted to go back to school, and I went and took some courses, extension courses at Harvard University in 1973. It was there that I read about a book in Time magazine, a book that I had dreamed about some 2 weeks previously. It was called The Secret Life of Plants. It was a book that was published by Harper's Row in 1973 by very distinguished authors. It was about parapsychology and paranormal events around the world. I immediately picked up the phone, having dreamed about this book some 2 weeks before. I called the authors and I asked them if I could buy the theatrical rights, in other words, the movie rights to this book. The gentleman said, my goodness, Mr. Tigret, I'm so glad that you called. You probably read the reviews. The reviewers in all the magazines said, don't buy this book, it's crazy. It's about all kinds of weird stuff and none of it can be proven. Partner and I, because the book has not sold one copy and it's supposed to be a big book for Harper's Row. I said, I don't care, I feel that it's my duty, I must buy these rights, which I did over the telephone and through some telegram shortly afterwards. We concluded the deal. 6 weeks after I bought these rights, this book suddenly turned around, hit the New York Times bestseller list, and stayed there for 57 weeks. Only Shogun, I think by James Clavell, has topped the sale of this book, which still continues to sell today. I was then suddenly called to Hollywood because this book was a bestseller, and the next thing I knew, I'd done a deal with Warner Brothers to distribute a film. Stevie Wonder, the famous artist, called me and we shared the production rights. He did the soundtrack for the film, which is an album by Stevie Wonder called The Secret Life of Plants. And I was blessed to spend the next year of my life traveling around the world in preparation for the screenplay for the film, visiting all the phenomenon on the planet. We went to fabulous institutions like Duke University, which has a parapsychology department and probably the most famous in the United States, started back in the 30s. We went to Johns Hopkins, UCLA, many institutions that were now delving into this unknown nature of man. And everywhere I went, I would meet various individuals, so-called psychics, people who had extraordinary powers of perception, but none could tell me where it came from. They all suggested you must go to the East, because here in the Eastern land, this ancient wisdom is still known and still practiced today. It was on my first trip to the East that I first heard of Sathya Sai Baba. I was in a place called Aurangabad, which is in the northern part of India, and I was sitting in a hotel lobby, and suddenly in my mind, which I've been having lots of strange experiences since I was a child, I heard this voice say, "Hey, you've come at last, come and see me." I looked around this hotel lobby, and the only thing that caught my attention was a portrait of Sathya Sai Baba, which was hanging in the lobby. Although I'd heard of him, I had never seen his photograph until that moment. When I discovered who it was that was speaking to me, I immediately went down to Bangalore the very next day. My experience began, I was very curious, obviously. We all are on those first visits, and I stood at the back. It was a festival day. There must have been an unusual number of people at White Field, probably 8,000 people, I don't know, but I came late as I usually do, including today, and I stood at the very back against the wall. Sai Baba came out, parted the crowd, walked right up to me, started making a circular motion with his hand, and out came this gray powder. That began my journey with Sathya Sai Baba. He didn't say anything to me at that time. I ate the vibhuti, which I'd been instructed to do by devotees there, and left there thinking that was an absolutely fantastic experience. 15 years between the first visit and the first interview with Sathya Sai Baba. I went every year, sometimes twice a year. And Sai Baba never looked at me. He never mentioned my name. He never spoke in my direction. He never called me for an interview. In fact, everyone was quite certain he was ignoring me very, very well over those 15 years. In fact, I was sort of the joke around the ashram. I finally got a job. I want to do something in service. And I became the guy when, you go down there and a lot of people get so involved with wanting an interview, and after the 5th or 6th day or 3rd or 4th trip, if they haven't gotten an interview, they are as neurotic a group as you've ever seen in your life. I'm sure all of you have been through that, as a matter of fact. And they used to pull me out. They said, well, you think you're having a tough time? This guy had an interview for 10 or 15 years. And that was my job. They literally rolled me out every time some neurotic group was going crazy. And this guy's been down here forever and he's never got an interview. No one even looked at him. It was no trouble at all to go there and not receive an interview. It was just a blessing to be there, just to be near him. I did have a number of experiences which I will share with you briefly. 1975, some 3 years after I had first gone down there, I was here in California and I went to a party somewhere late at night. I'd had a bit too much to drink, so I waited until about 5 o'clock to go home. And as I drove home at 5 o'clock in the morning, I fell asleep at the wheel, doing about 85 miles an hour. And this car leapt from the road. As it began to turn in midair, which it did about a dozen times before it stopped down a ravine, I suddenly woke up and looked to my right, and here seemed like a figure sitting next to me in this convertible car. It put its arm around me. The car went over some dozen times and was completely destroyed. There were no doors, there was no windshield, there was nothing left. I had no seatbelt on. And I knew it was Sathya Sai Baba. I left the next day for India to thank him, and of course his thanks or recognition was non-existent. He didn't even look at me, he didn't talk to me. And a couple of years later, I was in a hotel room in Denver, Colorado, and I had an epileptic fit. This was brought on by a large dosage of drugs, which I was taking at the time. And I literally lost all motor response. I was hyperventilating, foaming at the mouth. I suddenly fell to the floor. My vision was blurred, and the next thing I knew, I swallowed my tongue. I couldn't even reach my hand up to my mouth to pull my tongue out. It was a state of epilepsy. And the next thing I know, I am dead. And the spirit, like you've read about so many times, came right out of the top of my head. Suddenly I was in the room looking down at myself in a state of peace, I must say. It was pretty nice to be there. And the information came to my head that it was not necessary to die at this time. That all I had to do was call my Guru's name and he would save me. I called Sai Baba's name in this formless state, and suddenly he was in the room. He picked me up, put me on a bed, pulled my tongue out of my mouth, and pressed on my chest. When he did this, my spirit went back into my body, and as I was looking up, it was all blur, but all I could see was a red outfit with 3 little gold buttons. I again, the next day, left for India to thank him, and was ignored entirely the whole trip. These are very extreme experiences. Many of you have had the same experience in a more subtle form. It is just his presence. It's just that I was such a bad boy, he had to really work hard to keep me alive. Today, I really realized for the first time that I believe, for the first time in my career of trying to be a devotee, today I really do consider myself a devotee of Sathya Sai Baba. I have given in my heart, my actions, everything that I have. It was a long road. It is a long road for all of us. So I'm very grateful for this experience, because I will come away today for the first time feeling that indeed I am a devotee of Sathya Sai Baba. 15 years of sand time, that's what I call those 15 years. In fact, in the early days, the sale of the hard rock sort of culminated in the 15th year of my business. Sai Baba arranged for someone to come along and offer me too much money for my business, and it was an opportunity for me to fulfill a promise that I made to him after I met him for the first time. And I set up a foundation called the Rama Foundation, and I'd always set aside, Lord, I will give you half of everything I've got if you will help me with this business and guide me in my life. So when the sale of the hard rock came around, I suddenly had a great deal of money in which I wanted to give in service to Sathya Sai Baba. No one knew this, only myself and my wife. Suddenly I'm on one of my visits there in Prashanti Nilayam, and for the first time Sai Baba calls me in for an interview. I was in a state of complete shock. In fact, I thought he was talking to the guy behind me. I was convinced he had to be. It was a small room. There were another of other people from around the world that were there. And he said to me, I guess he'd been waiting to really pick on me good in person. So he put all the heat on me. He said, the first thing he said is, "Where is God?" I said, "God is in my heart." He said, "No. God is everywhere. It's like a fish swimming through water. The water is above the fish, around, below, and inside. You are a fish swimming through God." That is a concept which, if one can understand and believe every single moment, it will make you understand who you are and who He is, and also the word omniscience, because He is with us here today just as much as He is in Puttaparthi. As He has said to Himself, His form, His human form, is a delusion. And I warn you all of this delusion. I have suffered from it myself, thinking that there was some duality, that He was there and I'm here, and that's not the way it is at all. He is everywhere, including inside of you. You are Sai Baba Himself. He lives within each of us. The second question he asked me is, how do you get to God? And I have to preface this with going back some 15 years to the first visit to Prashanti Nilayam, which was some 3 or 4 months after the visit I had in Whitefield. And as I came out of the canteen, which I understand that they're rebuilding the canteen now, I don't know what I'm going to do with that. I used to say I come here for the food, because I love Utmai, and I think the food is great there. But as I came out the little canteen, I noticed a little sign over the door. You've all who've been in the canteen, at least the men's canteen. It said, "Love all, serve all." And when I went back to London to my business, I decided that this would be the foundation of my business and my life, because it was such a strange business dealing with all kinds of characters. I thought that I would base my business on this saying. It struck me in such a way. This saying, "Love all, serve all," became famous and synonymous with the Hard Rock Cafe. It was on tens of millions of t-shirts, matches, buttons, and in each Hard Rock Cafe, in very, very large letters, we had put "Love all, serve all." I would get up with my staff every week and preach about love all, serve all, and this is how we run our business. Now I'm back again in my first interview with my second question from our Lord. And He says to me, "How do you get to God?" Having missed the first question, I did not answer. He asked someone else, "How do you get to God?" He then turned to me, looked me directly in the eye, and said, "Love all, serve all." I knew then, as I had hoped and prayed, that he had been with me each and every step on my journey in my business and in my life, and of course burst into tears. He told me, as he took me back into the inner sanctums there for when he really lays you on the heavy stuff, and said, in fact it was very sweet, he took his little hand like this, and he said, a new chapter is beginning, a new page is turning. He said, I want you to work with me. I said, Swami, it is my honor and my duty to work with you in any way that I can. And I told him that I had set up a foundation called the Rama Foundation, and that it had a great deal of money, and that I would like to use it in service in some way. He said, yes, I know. So we will use it to build a hospital here in Vishanti Nilayam. And there my journey with the hospital began.
Issact took Sai Baba's motto, love all, serve all, and made it the motto of the Hard Rock. But even with all his wealth and fame, Issact felt there was still something missing from his life.
I said, look, I need to start a search. I need to go look for what I think is a master, a guru, a spiritual leader, a teacher, something, because of the hunger inside of me. I searched all over India. I went to every ashram, every holy place. I heard about this obscure little guru, decided to go down there, and there was a festival day, there was a huge crowd, and he parted the crowd and came right over to me. I was sitting at the back, and he said, you've come at last, I've been waiting for you. So he turned and said, we have many things that we're going to do together, you wait right here. He didn't speak to me again for 15 years.
Amidst the beauty and spirituality of India lies the reality of hard lives. Here in the vast rural state of Andhra Pradesh, villagers face drought and poverty on a daily basis. Little surprise then that when the authorities fail to deliver that essential resource, water, Sai Baba's ability to cut through the red tape means that he's hailed as a god. In the mid-1990s, his charity spent over £40 million supplying water to villages like this.
This is Sri Sathya Sai water.
Yeah, Sathya Sai water.
How long has it been here?
14 years.
14 years.
Yes.
Is this good water?
It is good water and healthy water.
This is healthy water. It's clean water.
Clean water, healthy water.
The water project that he did in Andhra Pradesh, in 1 year they laid 2,000 kilometers of pipe. They brought to thousands of villages fresh water that they never had, that women had to travel 20 miles a day to get a little bucket. That was an amazing project.
Issact Tigret did some good works of his own. By the time Sai Baba spoke to him again, he'd become an extremely rich man. When the Guru told him of his dream for an ultra-modern hospital in the heart of Andhra Pradesh, Tigret donated tens of millions of dollars. Prince Charles's architect, Keith Critchlow, who's also a Sai Baba devotee, was hired to design it. It was opened in 1991 and specialized in high-tech heart and kidney surgery, free of charge. Tigret is convinced that the hospital, built on blood, sweat and burgers, was worthy of his generosity. And certainly his guru was grateful.
This vessel, silver vessel, is a flower of love.